We reject this woke ideology. We will never surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke goes to die.
A few minutes ago, we were talking about states that are newly controlled by Democrats and how their agendas differ starkly from the agendas in states controlled by Republicans. And I think it's safe to say that wherever the GOP states are going next, Florida will get there first. Fresh off his big second-term win, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is turbocharging his war on woke, in which woke seems to mean anything Ron DeSantis doesn't like. DeSantis goes after all kinds of things for being woke: college basketball, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, Disney, even math textbooks. And now he is slamming professional hockey. The NHL recently announced a push for more diversity in its ranks. Its workforce is over 80% white, and its players are over 90% white. But when they announced a jobs fair in Florida, DeSantis' office called it discrimination for the NHL to specifically invite applicants from underrepresented backgrounds. The NHL folded and removed the job fair posting. So congratulations if you had keeping hockey white on your bingo card of Ron DeSantis' second-term priorities. But it is Florida's schools and universities that its governor is really trying to refashion an anti-woke image. DeSantis has just packed the board of Florida's most progressive public college with hand-picked allies. He's aiming to turn New College into a conservative Christian school. These new board members include Chris Rufo, who's orchestrated the right-wing attack on critical race theory. And Rufo is straightforward about his goals. Quote, "We have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all of the various cultural insanities under that brand category." Meanwhile, professors at other Florida universities are canceling their courses dealing with race for fear of being fired. Today, the presidents of Florida's system of community and state colleges put out a joint statement declaring they stand with Governor DeSantis and won't let evil critical race theory invade their campuses. Also today, the State Board of Education finalized a rule that could see school librarians prosecuted for having undesirable books in their libraries. Undesirable to DeSantis and his allies. And in a final flourish, today we learned that DeSantis has rejected a high school advanced placement course in African American studies. The course is already being piloted in 60 schools across the country, but apparently in the state of Florida, that curriculum is against the law. The conservative National Review reported excitedly today on the letter the DeSantis administration sent to the College Board, which sets AP course curricula. That letter says, quote, "The content of this course is inexplicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value." And it invites the College Board to, quote, "come back to the table with lawful, historically accurate content." All of this is bad enough for the people of Florida, but it may concern all of us outside of Florida if DeSantis really is on his way to a presidential run. Joining us now is Jelani Cobb, Dean of the Columbia Journalism School and a staff writer at The New Yorker. Dean Cobb, Jelani, thanks so much for being with us. And I think there's really no better person to put in perspective how damaging this agenda is in terms of education and higher education. Can you give us your thoughts on the moves that the DeSantis administration is making to censor the teaching of history and race in this country?
Sure. Well, there's a very practical point to this. Like, they're trying to eradicate the history of the civil rights movement, among other things. Weirdly enough, the civil rights movement is what made it possible for those universities to be so prominent in the first place. That the quiet part of this narrative is that certainly black people in the South benefited from the civil rights movement. The second biggest beneficiaries of the civil rights movement were the Southern business class at its universities. It's chambers of commerce that were hoping to modernize the South, which was viewed as an economic and intellectual backwater by much of the country. And so in this march backward to make this heavy-handed diktat about what can be taught and what can't be taught, you're literally pushing these institutions back into the past. So good luck with attracting world-class faculty and keeping them there. Good luck with attracting the top students. Good luck with maintaining the rankings that make these universities in the South competitive in the first place. This is a kind of rearguard march with maybe the people who are in those crowds cheering, but none of those people are going to be, responsible for what happens when their universities start cratering in terms of their prestige and the regard in which people view them.
I just wonder if this isn't, I mean, it seems, at least from the support that DeSantis receives in certain corners, it's part of this obsession with turning back the clock, as you said, not just in the civil rights era, but the sort of the intellectual flourishing of ideas that happened in higher institutes of higher education in the 60s and 70s, and the sort of, bringing a more inclusive, progressive view to the ways in which we understand both, the canon and history and a number of other things. And the right seems to be very preoccupied with that. It's like they lost the culture war writ large, so they're going to wage it in the halls of education. And my concern is there are Republicans all over the country that look at what Ron DeSantis is doing and say, hey, I want to do that in my backyard. I want to do that in my state. I want to bring that kind of curricula to Wisconsin or other parts of the country where there is, or Virginia, where you have Glenn Youngkin, the governor, who's expressed support for this kind of stuff. I mean, does that concern you? Apart from what it does to the university system, what about the general public in these states?
Sure. I mean, it has negative implications all over the place. And one of the bizarre ironies of this situation is that when Ron DeSantis, in denouncing the AP course, he used the language of saying that this was discriminatory, that studying these subjects would be discriminatory and implicitly discriminatory against white people. The weird thing about that, the really, really weird thing about that is that people who are scholars of critical race theory will tell you that the theory basically holds that in a society that is as racially riven as this one, people will use anti-discrimination tactics in order to further the cause of actual discrimination. So in short, Ron DeSantis is practicing critical race theory and doing exactly this. He's validating the theory in these actions. But the implications of this are all over the place. And the last thing that I think that's really important to note is that the kind of protections that we have and the academic freedoms that we have in this country are overwhelmingly a product of what happened during the Cold War and the McCarthy era. Another point at which we saw heavy-handed attempts to try to dictate what people could and could not learn, people being prosecuted, people losing their jobs for teaching facts that were accurate but uncomfortable. And so we're yet again having a march backward in the pages of history.
I wonder if you look at this, sort of holistically in terms of the Supreme Court taking up affirmative action and this movement we now see that suggests that efforts to diversify bodies, whether they're school bodies, whether they're corporate boardrooms, whether they're the NHL, are fundamentally anti-white and that they are reverse discrimination. That theory, while fringe, now seems to be more widely accepted than at any time since I have been alive. Is there any way to turn back the wheel to get back to sanity as far as what we're talking about when we're actually talking about diversity?
Sure. I mean, so when you cited those numbers, the NHL's workforce being 84% white, its players being 90% white, and then you look at the fact that whites are about 60% or 61% of the American population, you say, oh, well, there's a disproportionate representation there, or rather, an underrepresentation of other groups. So to frame the efforts to diversify as discriminatory are in effect saying that you want to uphold the kind of discrimination that has already resulted in people being so poorly represented in that one area. There are lots of other areas of American employment and universities and so on that we can find those same sorts of statistics about. And so I think that's what's really at the heart here, to try to frame a upholding of the status quo and really validation of the worst sins of the past and try to frame it as an actual kind of civic virtue.
Validation of the worst sins of the past. That is what is actually happening here. I think it's really important to make that the headline rather than we're pushing back against some Marxist liberal ideology that's trying to brainwash everyone's children. Jelani Cobb, Dean of the Columbia Journalism School and staff writer at The New Yorker. It's such an honor and pleasure to have you with us, Jelani. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.